One reason why this is the primary burn location is that on October 31st, Mr. Avery had a big whopping fire there on the 31st of October. And we haven't heard any evidence of a big whopping fire, the kind that would fully consume a human body anywhere else on that property. That's the primary burn location, ladies and gentlemen. You can find that, and you should find that beyond a reasonable doubt. That shouldn't be a question for you. The state will call Scott Taddick to the stand.
It was the fire that I remembered most of that day.
Later that night, did you return to the Yonda property?
Yes, I did.
Could you tell the jury what you saw at that time, please?
Saw a big fire
And can you tell the jury where you saw the fire, please?
right there.
Are you able to estimate how high or how tall the flames were as you were watching there about 7:45?
They're almost as tall as the garage,
So,
8, 10 feet. I don't know, 10 feet maybe. 10 feet tall the flames were.
big fire.
Big fire.
Did you see Stephen Avery standing next to or near that fire?
Yes, I did.
I could see the flames, and it's like, holy man, he has a huge fire down there. I don't understand how a house couldn't have melted.
Welcome everyone to a Reading with the Crew special presentation. My name is Dr. Silkman and I'm from the Foul Play team. Today's presentation is entitled A Big Whopping Fire. I hope that you enjoy the presentation. All the opinions expressed in this presentation are my own. Avery had planned the brutal attack down to the location, the Avery salvage yard, and the best manner of disposing of the body to burn it. Heat, especially a big fire, is the one thing that destroys all DNA left on or in the body, semen included. Eliminating DNA at the crime scene, Stephen knew, was the best way to avoid having a murder pinned on him. He'd become somewhat of a DNA expert during his 18 years of incarceration, benefiting from his front row seat to scientific advances in the field. Stephen didn't have a specific woman in mind, of course. Teresa Halbach just happened to fit the template of his fantasy. We can see the location of Stephen Avery's burn pit, and in close proximity to the burn pit was the Yonda residence. This photograph was taken on November the 6th, 2005 by Trooper Reese. It's a close-up of Stephen Avery's burn pit. How were the cremains discovered in Stephen Avery's burn pit? A report written out by Sergeant Jason Jost. Earlier, when I had been in the command post area, I remember someone mentioning that Joshua Redont had checked on his hunting trailers on Monday evening. He saw there was a large fire burning near Stephen Avery's property. The fire was described as being larger than usual. I, Sergeant Jost, started to piece all of this information together. I felt this area, if not already looked at, should be checked for any type of evidence. When Officer Mignon returned, I spoke with her about my feelings of the burn pile. She stated she also felt that something was unusual with that area. Upon returning to the command post, I made contact with CASO Lieutenant Sipple. I explained to him that I felt the burn pit area specifically should be checked further. He responded to the property with me. Without disturbing the area, we walked close to the burn pit to take a further look. I mentioned to him that due to the aggressiveness of the dog, it was very possible that the other canine handlers may not have walked their dogs this close to the area. This may have hindered officers from specifically going to this location. Based on this information, I returned to the command post to speak with the crime lab. Members of the crime lab responded to the scene. Using their sifting equipment, they sifted through the majority of the burn pile. They located numerous bones and teeth which were present amongst the ashes. These items were later given to the CASO for processing. On November the 8th, 2005, Stephen Avery's burn pit was sifted by the crime lab, as well as other law enforcement officers. The material that didn't pass through the filter meshes were placed into a box, as you can see up above. There are no in situ photos or video of the burn pit and the sifting process. There was no state coroner nor a forensic anthropologist on site when the sifting was done.
So you always take photos before you start processing. That would help you maybe place the body in a certain position. But if someone's moving around the body, then it doesn't really matter. You know, they're not going to do as in-depth photos because if the evidence has been moved, then it's not in its original position, so why photograph it, I guess.
Quite often they would ask me, does this look like a bone? I said, if there's any question, put it in the box.
The box of bones were given to a forensic anthropologist, Dr. Kenneth Bennett. On November the 9th, 2005, he had examined the box of bones. Through his analysis, he was able to derive that the cremains were from an adult human female. The question that we would like to ask is the following. What do these eyewitnesses initially recall about a fire coming from Stephen Avery's burn pit on October the 31st, 2005? The specific witnesses are the following. Joshua Redont, Travis Growell, Carmen Wench, Brendan, Blaine, Brian, and Bobby Dassey, Barbie Under, Scott Kadich, Kayla, and Candy Avery. The state's case was that Stephen Avery's burn pit was the primary burn site. Let's have a look at Joshua Redont. He was interviewed on November the 5th. This is the same day that the RAV4 was found on the Avery salvage yard. I quote, Redont stated on Monday, 10/31/05, at approximately 4:30 p.m., he drove up to his deer camp off Cuss Road through his gravel pit and observed a fire in the proximity of Stephen Avery's residence or on the Avery property. Joshua Redont completed a written statement form. See Exhibit section. Redont informed Investigator Steyer on Monday, shortly after 4:30 p.m., Redont was driving to his deer camp through his quarry where he observed a large fire on the Stephen Avery property located by the Red House. Redont indicates he remembers it being right after 4:30 because he had an employee that had just come to work to take another employee's shift at 4:30 p.m. Redont indicated it was a partly cloudy or partly sunny day and he had a clear visibility from his location while he was driving to his deer camp. Redont indicated he did not observe any people standing next to the fire or any vehicles located on the Avery property. I quote, On October 31st, at approximately 4:30 p.m., I drove up to my deer camp off of Cuss Road through my gravel pit and observed the fire going in the proximity of Stephen Avery's home or on Avery property. The fire appeared to be contained to a 55-gallon drum. On November the 11th, 2005, a video was done where Josh Rodon allegedly saw the fire towards Stephen Avery's property. Josh Rodon stated that he was driving in his vehicle, and he stated that the flames were approximately 2.5 feet to 3 feet in height. It was bright orange, and he saw no smoke, and it appeared to be contained to a 55-gallon drum. He saw no one. In a Case 02 report, Josh Rodon stated that he thought he was around about 900 to 1,200 feet away. It was determined that Rodon was actually lower than the burn pit area by around about 15 to 20 feet. Josh Rodon, on November the 10th, 2005, drew what he believed he observed that day. This photograph shows an aerial view of where Josh Rodon allegedly was. And in Case 02 in 2017, he was asked to put an X where he believed he was driving towards his deer camp when he had spotted the fire coming from around Stephen Avery's property. In his report, he stated that he saw a glow out of the corner of his eye.
Thinking it was like right in this area
Yeah,
where I just like, I caught it on the corner of my eye. I
yeah.
didn't stop or anything, I just kept driving. I didn't think anything of it.
Now, none of these little trees were here.
No.
Okay, so that was clear out there, right? You
It was
could
clear and the
see
berm wasn't built up.
berm wasn't built up. So you have, it's pretty much just straight you can see. Okay, so when you draw this map,
Yep.
so that's where the area you're seeing the flame?
That was my guesstimation, yes.
Okay, so it's behind, like that's Avery's trailer. He's got that garage, and then his sister's place is right there. So it's behind it.
Just so you understand, he's guessing. He
Right.
doesn't see any barrel. He doesn't see any pit. He's guessing from his knowledge of where their buildings were. Roughly, this was his best guesstimate.
Essentially, Josh Rodon stated that he was guessing. This begs the question, how reliable was Josh Rodon as a witness? The next person was Travis Growell, and he was interviewed on the 11th of November. He was interviewed by Special Agent Tom Sturdivant. On November the 11th, 2005, at approximately 11:50 a.m., Thomas A. Sturdivant interviewed Travis Growell, who works for F. Rodon Sons, Inc. as a hopper loader and was working on Monday, 10/31/2005 at the pit on Highway Q. Growell stated he worked from 4 a.m. until noon and then from 4:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. on Monday, 10/31/2005. Growell stated he was running the hopper and operating the loader throughout the day and evening. Growell stated it was after 5:30 or 6 p.m. that he smelled a foul odor coming from the Avery salvage yard. Growell stated he could not see a fire or smoke as it was dark outside and described the odor as something that, I quote, I never smelt before. Growell distinctively recalled that it was Monday, Halloween night, that he was working and that he normally doesn't work at night. The wind was blowing towards the pit from the Avery property. Growell stated he mentioned this foul odor to two other employees, Chris Peterson and David Trammell. Was the foul odour the result of a person being cremated? What does burning flesh smell like? Burned flesh assaults all of your senses at once. The smell is sickening. If you look up the meteorological records of Manitowoc, Wisconsin, the wind direction that evening was actually coming from the west and west-northwest. And you can see here on the overhead map, you can see the position of the Avery salvage yard, which is surrounded by Redon's quarry, and the yellow arrow indicates roughly where Travis Groel was working that night, close to Highway Q. Right next to Redon's quarry on the left-hand side was the Manitowoc County gravel pit. And you can see in the Avery salvage yard the general location of the burn pit. The issue is taking into account the direction of where the wind was blowing that evening. The wind was blowing away from Travis Groel. The wind was blowing any smoke or odour actually towards Barb Yunder's residence. Travis Groel does not see a fire nor smoke. Human, cut and burnt cremains were found in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, which is adjacent to Redon's quarry. On November the 10th, Rob and Julie Kramer returned to the Avery salvage yard with K9 Trace and K9 Brutus in response to a request by Lieutenant Herman of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. We were asked to check a fence line that ran east-west west of Stephen Avery's home. K9 Trace alerted on the first of 3 piles of disturbed earth located along this fence line, alert 14. The rest of the fence line was checked without alert. We were then sent to the county gravel pit south of the Avery property. K9 Brutus was transported by ATV to that location where burn piles and fresh digs had been identified. We checked several areas in the gravel pit and fresh digs in the walls of the pit without interest from the dog. Numerous shell casings and unspent bullets were observed. In an area of large concrete slabs, several burn piles had been marked. K9 Brutus barked in 2 separate locations on this pile, alert 15. These locations were double flagged for identification. Once the locations were logged, mapped for evidence. In both locations, Brutus barked and dug at the burned area in the concrete. We were transported back to command post after this assignment was complete. We were dismissed from the scene at 4:30 p.m. Brutus is a canine that detects human decomposition. The very first person I want to look at is Brendan Dassey. And Brendan Dassey was questioned on November the 6th, 2005 at Crivets. I quote, "Well, I work there a little bit, but that was just to get some wood because we were going to have a bonfire on Thursday." You were going to have a bonfire on Thursday? On this past Thursday or on this Thursday coming up? This Thursday, last week. Last week, Thursday, you were going to have a bonfire. I was going to invite some friends from school. Did you have that bonfire? Why not? Because my mum was pissed off at Stephen. Brendan Dassey does not mention a fire on October the 31st, 2005. However, the investigators were not finished with Brendan Dassey. He was interviewed again by Kim Skorlinski on the 10th of November. Now please note that by November the 10th, 2005, the partial burnt cremains that were sifted from Stephen Avery's burn pit were determined to be from an adult human female. And I quote, Dassey was asked when was the last time his uncle, Stephen Avery, had a fire in the pit behind his residence, or more specifically, behind his garage. Dassey said it was either last Tuesday night, November 1st, 2005, or Wednesday night, November 2nd, 2005. But he thinks it was Wednesday night. Dassey said he was hoping to have a fire with Stephen on Monday night, October 31st, 2005, but his mum got in a fight with Stephen on Saturday, October 29, 2005, and told him that he cannot have a fire with Stephen on Monday. Dassey was asked what type of materials he and Stephen burned in the fire pit on Wednesday night, and he said branches and other wood they collected from the yard. He said they also burned garbage, a few old tyres and an old car seat. Dassey said he and Stephen drove his mum's golf cart around the yard picking up these branches, wood, tyres and a car seat. He estimated that they burned about 5 old tyres in the fire. Dassey said the car seat was maroon in colour and had been sitting next to his mother's garage for about 2 weeks before Stephen decided to burn it. He said he helped Stephen put the car seat into the fire after they had the fire going for a while. Dassey thought they were going to use the car seat in the van that his mum was trying to sell, but for some reason they did not do that. Dassey was asked how Stephen contacted him to have a fire. He said Stephen called him on his mum's home telephone sometime after supper. Dassey thought this may have been around 8 p.m. He said Stephen said something like, "Why don't you come outside and help me with the fire?" Dassey said when he went outside, which was about 5 to 10 minutes after Stephen called him, Stephen had already piled some branches and garbage on the fire that had just lit it. He observed 2 plastic garbage bags already in the fire and starting to burn. Dassey was asked what was in the garbage bags, and he said it looked like regular garbage. Dassey was asked if Stephen had a fire on Monday, October 31st, 2005, and he said he did not see a fire on Monday. Dassey was asked if Stephen had a fire on Tuesday, November the 1st, 2005, and he said that he could have been the night he and Stephen had a fire, but he thought it was on Wednesday, November the 2nd, 2005. Dassey did go to school every day last week and said if Stephen had a fire during the day, he would not know about it. Dassey was asked if he noticed any strange odour coming from the fire pit when he and Stephen were burning, and he said no. He was asked if after the fire, Stephen dug through the ashes or smashed any items that had not burned, and he said he did not see that. Dassey did say that Stephen took some wire out of the fire and told Dassey to put it in a tan car over by the old garage near the shop. Dassey said the length of wire was long and he thought it was about 20 feet. Dassey was asked how long he and Stephen were outside burning at the fire on Wednesday night, and he said probably 1.5 to 2 hours. Dassey thought they both left the fire at the same time to go into their residences. He said that was the only fire he was aware of that Stephen had last week. Dassey was asked about the mound of rocks and dirt next to Stephen's fire pit behind his garage where the doghouse is located. He said that mound had been there from the previous occupant of Stephen's house long before Stephen moved there. Dassey was asked if he knew what was underneath that mound, and he said no. Dassey was asked about clothes that were found in his mother's fire ring behind their residence. He said those were old clothes that did not fit Dassey or his brothers anymore. Dassey was asked if he saw Stephen dig up any ashes or haul any ashes out of his fire pit at any time last week, and he said no. Dassey was asked if he saw Stephen do any stomping or crushing in the fire pit at any time last week, and he said no. Dassey was asked if Stephen had the John Deere skid steer over at the fire pit any day last week, and he said no. Dassey said he has never seen the John Deere skid steer in Stephen's backyard, and the only time he saw Stephen operate it was trying to smooth out the road to their residences. Dassey said the dirt road has a lot of potholes. Dassey was asked when was the last time Stephen burned in that fire pit behind his house, other than last week. He could not recall, but said it was probably several weeks before that. Dassey was asked when was the last time Stephen burned in his burn barrel, and he said last week. He said Stephen probably burns 2 times a week in his burn barrel. Dassey was advised that there were several tools by the fire pit, such as a shovel, a rake, and a trowel. He was asked if he used any of these tools during the night he and Stephen had a fire. Dassey said he may have used the shovel to move the burning material around. A couple of minutes later, Skorlinski returned to Dassey and told him that the investigators believed that on Monday, October the 31st, 2005, Stephen killed Horbach and burned her body in his fire pit. Skorlinski told Dassey that investigators found pieces of female bone and teeth. Dassey was asked if he helped Stephen burn Horbach's body, and he said no. Dassey was asked if he saw anything in the fire pit that resembled a human body or human bone, and he said no. Skorlinski told him that this is not the time to be lying to protect Stephen. Dassey said he did not know anything about Stephen burning Horbach. Brendan Dassey denied that he was at a fire with Stephen Avery on October the 31st, 2005. Now, we have Stephen Avery's combined cell phone and landline records for October the 31st, 2005. And if you remember what Brendan said, he stated that Stephen had phoned his house and called Brendan to come over. There's one problem with that scenario. Stephen Avery did not call the Yunda residents after 8 p.m. to invite Brendan Dassey over to attend a fire on October the 31st, 2005. The call that Stephen made at 9:20 p.m. went unanswered. So, was it possible that Brendan Dassey was misremembering when he was with Stephen Avery at the fire? This complements the fact that Barb did not call Stephen from her cell phone. Barb had mentioned that she had called Stephen Avery on October the 31st, 2005 on her cell phone to Stephen's cell phone to make sure that Brendan Dassey was at home by 10 p.m. because it was cold that evening. There is no evidence of that phone call. The next person we're going to have a look at is Blaine Dassey, and he was interviewed on November the 7th, 2005. At approximately 5:20 p.m. on 10/31/2005, Blaine was picked up by Jason's mum, Carmen Wench. Wench picked Blaine up in a purplish coloured minivan. After Wench picked up Blaine, Blaine went to Jason's house for supper and they went trick-or-treating. Blaine estimated he returned from trick-or-treating at approximately 9:30 that evening. When Blaine returned from trick-or-treating, he did not see anyone outside. Blaine stated when he got home, Brendan, Barb and Bobby were inside and everyone was still awake. Shortly after Blaine got home, sometime between 9:30 and 10, Blaine said he went to bed. Blaine was asked if he recalled anything unusual happening after he went to bed that evening, and Blaine said he does not. Sometimes Blaine said Stephen will come over to the house and talk about what they're going to do. For example, Steve will suggest that they work on a car or have a bonfire. Blaine was asked if there were any bonfires last week, and Blaine responded there were not. Blaine said he would know if there was a bonfire because he always liked to have them. Blaine was asked what materials they would use to burn during their bonfires. And Blaine said sometimes they would burn tyres and sometimes they would burn wood. On Monday, November the 11th, 2005, at approximately 2:15 p.m, Strauss and Wilson went back to re-interview Blaine to verify the activities of Wednesday, 11/02/2005, and Thursday, 11/03/2005. Blaine said that one day last week, week of 10/31/05, Blaine was supposed to have a girl over to his house for a bonfire. This girl was identified as Adriana Owens, a sophomore at Mishcot High School. Blaine said this bonfire never took place, as Owens later said she did not want to come out for a bonfire. Blaine Dassey did not mention seeing a fire, smoke, nor Stephen Avery. However, on November the 15th, 2005 interview, Blaine Dassey observed Stephen Avery at a bonfire behind his garage and the flames were about 3 feet high. The next witness, a very important witness, was Carmen Wench, and she was interviewed on the 14th of November. Carmen Wench had picked up and dropped off Blaine Dassey on October the 31st, 2005. On Friday, 11/11/2005, at approximately 11:46 a.m., Lisa Wilson and Calumet County investigator Wendy Baldwin interviewed Carmen Wench. Wilson explained to Wench that it was Wilson's understanding that she had been at the Avery property on Monday, October the 31st, 2005, Halloween. Wench said that Blaine A. Dassey was going trick-or-treating with her son Jason Cresco that evening as they were going to chaperone Jason's 2 younger brothers. Wench said Blaine had called about 1/2 hour after getting home from school and told her that he needed a ride from his place to her place for trick-or-treating. Wench said she picked Blaine up at the end of Avery Road between 5:30 p.m. and 6 p.m, where the Chevy Blazer was for sale. Wench said she would not drive down the driveway to Blaine's residence as it was bumpy and rutted. Wench said Blaine was dressed in an outfit for Halloween. Wilson asked Wench if she recalled seeing any smoke or fire as she was coming down Avery Road to pick up Blaine. Wench said she did not recall seeing any smoke or fire, but added that she was in a hurry as she felt they may be late for trick-or-treating. Wilson asked Wench how Blaine seemed once she picked him up. Wench said Blaine seemed happy to get away on a school night, as he usually was not allowed to do things on school nights. Wilson asked Wench if she also dropped Blaine off. Wench said Blaine was supposed to arrange his own ride home. However, at approximately 8 p.m, he told her he couldn't find a ride home. Wench said she gave Blaine a ride home as well. Wench said she dropped Blaine off where she had picked him up at approximately 8:15 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Wench said she recalled seeing a gas truck at the workstation nearby Avery Road. Wilson asked Wench if she recalled seeing any smoke or fire when she dropped Blaine off. Wench said she did not. Wench added that she does not like driving at night, so she was in a hurry to drop him off and get out of there and get home. So please note, we can compare this to what Kayla and Candy Avery had told investigator Mark Wiegert. The next individual that was interviewed was Brian Dassey, and he was interviewed on the 10th of November. I quote, Brian was asked about the burning barrels at his residence. Brian said they have 3 or 4 burning barrels and that they were located in between his house and the large 2-car garage that belonged to them. Wilson asked Brian how many burning barrels Stephen had. Brian said Stephen had 1 burning barrel and that it was set off further from his property, located closest to the driveway by a utility pole there. Wilson asked Brian about a burning pit located by their property. Brian said there was a pit behind Stephen's garage, which we called the single-car garage during the interview, and that it was used to burn loose brush and branches. Brian was asked if he saw any smoke or fire coming from the burning barrels or the brush pit on Halloween. Brian said he did not. Bobby Dassey was interviewed on the 9th of November. I quote, Dassey indicated that on Tuesday or Wednesday, he observed a burning in the area in a pit behind Stephen's garage. He believed there was brush burning. Dassey stated he was home that night. Bobby Dassey states Stephen sometimes burns tyres in the pit, and Stephen usually burns tyres at night, so you cannot see the smoke. Dassey indicated Stephen does not burn his tyres anywhere else, and he indicated he believed Stephen was burning with Dassey's little brother, Brendan. Bobby Dassey does not mention fire or smoke on the evening of October the 31st, 2005, when he goes to work at approximately 9:30 p.m. Barb Yunder was interviewed on the 9th of November, and I quote, When she arrived home at approximately 8 p.m. Monday, October 31, she did not recall seeing anyone having a bonfire or fire in the area, particularly Stephen Avery. She has not seen Stephen have a fire behind his residence at all, and she has not seen Stephen burning his trash out in front in the burn barrel in the last several weeks. She has not heard from any of her boys that Stephen has had a burn going behind his residence in the last week or two. Capitani asked her if she would know if someone was burning tyres close to her house. She said that she would smell it and her whole house would stink, and she believes she would know if Stephen was burning tyres, but she confirmed that she did not see any fire on that Monday behind Stephen's house. However, Yanda stated she's not home very often, so she would not know if Stephen was burning tyres over the last week. Yanda burns her trash every week and a half to 2 weeks in her own barrels, which are located behind her house. There are 3 or 4 burn barrels there. Again, she stated she did not know if Stephen had a fire going or if he was burning anything Monday night.
I think it'd take a lot to burn a body.
Well, of course it would.
I think it'd take a couple of days.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Well, I couldn't tell you either. But you would imagine that,
Yeah?
especially with burns.
Yeah?
And I didn't have no fire there all week.
No.
The last time I had it was a week.
I only remember Monday night.
Huh?
I only remember that Monday night.
The Monday night before that.
The day I went up to the hospital with Scott to see his mom. That day.
What day was that?
That was a Monday.
The 31st?
I don't know. I'd have to look at the calendar.
That was on a Monday.
That could be. Wait.
Yeah, but I didn't have no fire there then. Not no Monday night.
Yeah, I think you did.
Huh?
Yeah, I think you did. Because when we came home at 8 o'clock, you were standing outside by the fire.
Then Brendan was with me.
It could be. I don't know.
I thought that was during the week before that. I don't know. And now you got me puzzled.
No, I think it was the 31st. Because when we came back from the hospital,
Yeah.
it was about, I don't know, 7:45 or so, 8 o'clock, something like that, when he dropped me off.
Yeah.
And then later on I went back. You had a fire when we pulled in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that was the 31st, that when she had her back surgery.
I don't know.
I don't know, I'd have to ask her.
I don't know. I don't remember. Yeah, but that wasn't, I didn't have a fire very long.
I don't know how long you had it.
No, Brendan was home by what?
I don't know. I didn't get home until midnight.
Oh, he did?
I didn't, no. And he was already home already.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that would take a long time. Half the night.
Yeah.
A burn a body, I would imagine. I thought it was during the week I had that fire.
Well, that would be during the week.
No.
Monday night.
The week before that.
I don't know. I think you had it that Monday.
I don't know.
Kitty.
All I did was burn that brush. And what? 3-4 tires
Yeah.
that I picked up from over by you.
Yeah. And that car, that seat.
The car seat.
Scott Tadich was interviewed on the 10th of November. Scott Tadich was called up to testify in Stephen Avery's trial. Mr. Tadich stated that he went to Barb's house to pick her up and take her to see his mother in Green Bay. He stated that Barb is close to his mother, so she wanted to go to the hospital to see her. Tadich stated that when he arrived at Barbara's house, she was standing outside with Stephen Avery, and one of her younger sons. Tadich stated that he didn't know the boy's name, but he was one of the young kids. Mr. Tadich stated that Barbara got into his truck and they drove to Aurora Bay Care Medical Center in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Mr. Tadich stated that they stayed there for about 1 hour and they drove back and he got her home around 7:30 to 7:45 p.m. He stated that he got home around 8 p.m. Mr. Tadich stated that around 9 p.m., Barb drove out to his house to visit and she stayed there until 11 or 12 p.m. Mr. Tadich was asked if Barb was acting okay, and he stated that she was fine and that nothing unusual was happening. They just talked. Mr. Tadich was asked when was the last time he saw Barbara Yonder. Tadich stated that he saw her last Sunday, 11/06/2005, and she told him that she was not allowed to get her dog from the trailer because of the police investigation. Mr. Tadich stated that he has no idea what happened at the Avery place and he could not provide any further information, and the interview was concluded. Scott Tadich did not mention seeing or smelling a fire or smoke or Stephen Avery tending a fire on October the 31st, 2005. Scott Tadich significantly changed his recollections in later interviews. He was a key witness against Stephen Avery.
Hey, what time did you have to go see your mom that night?
My mom, we were up there by
Monday night.
Monday night?
Yeah.
We were back up there by 6:30, 6:45, something like that.
So what time did you get back?
About 7:30, 48. I was home by 8 o'clock.
Well, so I didn't have that fire too long then.
No.
No. This time you got back, we were almost done.
Yep.
Yeah, we were on the home stretch.
Both Kayla and Candy Avery were interviewed on the 20th of February 2006. This was 112 days after the fact. As I was walking with Blank, she stated to me that her cousin, Brendan, who had been burning things with Stephen on Halloween night, had been acting up lately. I asked Blank what she meant by him acting up, to which Blank stated Brendan would just sit there and stare into space and start crying. Blank also told me that Brendan had lost approximately 40 pounds since this all started a couple of months ago. Blank and her mother Candy both told me at that time they both remember seeing the bonfire by Stephen's house on Halloween night. Blank and Candy had stopped by Blank grandmother Dolores on Halloween night, and they remember seeing the fire down by Stephen's trailer. This is the layout of the properties on the Avery salvage yard, and you can see Stephen Avery's burn pit to the extreme right-hand corner. Dolores Avery's property was all the way on the left-hand side. So it's very interesting that both Kayla and Candy remember seeing a fire from that distance to Stephen Avery's burn pit. How credible were Kayla's and Candy's recollections about seeing the fire? And if you remember Carmen Wench, she does not recall seeing a fire or any smoke. There were witnesses that were on the Avery salvage yard on October the 31st, 2005, that didn't mention or see fire or smoke coming from Stephen Avery's burn pit. That included Earl Avery, Chuck Avery, Dolores Avery, Robert Fabian, James J. Kennedy. Now, he did notice greyish smoke coming from the centre of the junkyard, known as the pit area, while waiting for Chuck Avery. However, he did not see the source of the smoke. It was evident that several eyewitnesses had changed their recollections regarding seeing a fire at Stephen Avery's burn pit on October the 31st, 2005. The investigators, especially Kim Skolinski, were telling family members that Stephen Avery was guilty. Now, knowing that there were inconsistencies in the testimonies, this did not stop Mr. Kratz. And I quote, "We could start with the moment or with the visual or with the image of that man, Stephen Avery, standing outside of a big bonfire with flames over the roof, or at least over the garage roof, and the silhouette of Stephen Avery with the bonfire in the background and the observations made by some witnesses. Can you all picture that? Can you picture that as a moment in time? At that moment, by the way, although dramatic and although important, should tell the whole story. That moment of Stephen Avery, after the murder was committed, of Stephen Avery tending the fire, of Stephen Avery disposing of and mutilating the body of a 25-year-old Teresa Hallbach."
The physical evidence, the DNA evidence, the eyewitness testimony, the scientific evidence, the big fire that Mr. Avery had, common sense, all point to one person.
Investigators had discovered that there were multiple locations where burnt human remains were found. For example, in Yonder Burn Barrel number 2 and in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, there were several debris piles.
You found in the material from the quarry pile 2 fragments that appeared to you to be pelvic bone.
That's correct.
You suspected them of being human pelvic bone.
That's correct.
The charring and calcined condition that you saw was essentially consistent with the charring and the calcined condition in the Yonder burn barrel and behind Stephen Avery's garage.
That is correct, sir.
Nowhere did you find evidence that you were looking at bone fragments from more than one body.
That is correct, sir.
So what you conclude is that by human agency, bone fragments here were moved.
Some bone fragments identified as human had been moved. That's correct.
All right. The vast majority of the human bone fragments was found behind Stephen Avery's garage.
That's correct.
Why were they inconsistent with human bone fragments that could have been moved to that site after burning?
I would expect to see some breakage to some fragments with that transport, and I did not see anything like that.
Well, we do know that the very recovery of burnt bone fragments from behind Mr. Avery's garage involved shoveling, correct?
That's correct.
Transport to a sifting screen.
Yes, sir.
Sifting on the screen.
That's correct.
So you're not able to say that the bone fragments you found are inconsistent with having been transported to the burn area and poured out there.
Based on the volume of human bone fragments behind the garage, I find it highly unlikely that was not the primary burn location.
All right. But I guess that rests on an opinion that transport in a barrel or some other container and being poured out would have done more damage to those human bone fragments than shoveling, sifting, putting into a box, and transporting to Madison would have done?
I really don't know.
You don't know one way or the other.
That's correct.
And you cannot reasonably rule out another possible burn site, can you?
Based on the information I have at hand, I cannot.
That's all I have.
The defense team had their own forensic anthropologist in order to rebut some of Dr. Eisenberg's claims.
There was no systematic approach to the collection of the evidence at first processing, from what I saw. I know there was no grid imposed at that time during the initial excavation. I was informed that shovels were used in order to do that, and it wasn't, shall we say, a more forensic archaeological approach.
Okay, so other than nitpicking, why does this matter? Why does it matter?
Well, it matters as far as being able to tell things about the circumstances surrounding the burn of the body, where the body was burned. Was it moved? Is this the actual location or not?
And based on the recovery method that was used here, are you able to offer an opinion about where these human remains were burned?
No, I'm not.
Can you agree with Dr. Eisenberg's opinion that probably the area behind Mr. Avery's garage was the original burn site?
No.
Why not?
I've been involved in cases where human remains have been burned in one location and moved to another location. And in those cases, in fact, the actual location where the bones have been moved to tends to be the location where most of the remains are.
These bones in the quarry I'm going to take about 20 seconds to talk about, because the best anybody can say is that they're possible human. What does possible human mean? Well, it means we don't know what it is. All right? The best anthropologists in the world don't know what these bones are. Even through testing, what's called mitochondrial DNA testing, whether they're human or not could not, even by the FBI, be determined. So the bones in the quarry are really not evidence in this case. And so Mr. Strang's made a big deal out of showing you maps and a little flag and things like that about possible bones. Again, speculation, conjecture is not part of this case. Facts are going to be what decides this case.
You know that in the defense, you've got to establish that she was killed elsewhere. And here are a pile of human bones in the gravel pit where the suspected pelvis is. And those bones have been documented by the state expert as being human, not possibly human, but human, and then some of them have cut marks on them.
I like to leave some questions for you to consider. Which witnesses did you find credible in their recollections and why? Which witnesses did you find the least credible in their recollections and why? Why did several witnesses completely change their recollections about the fire? Do you believe that Stephen Avery had a fire on the evening of October the 31st, 2005? If Stephen Avery had a fire on that evening, did that automatically imply that Stephen Avery, with Brendan's assistance, had cremated Teresa Horbach in the burn pit? Was Stephen Avery's burn pit the primary burn location? Why do you think so? Why would Stephen Avery move some of the cremains in Barb Yunder's burn barrel and the Manitowoc County gravel pit, yet leave some remaining in his burn pit? Please leave your responses in the comment section. I really would love to get your opinion. Thank you very much for listening into the presentation. My name is Dr. Silkman, and I'm from the Foul Play team.
Any experienced crime scene person would be able to recognize that the thermal damage and the residual materials that should be present if there was a large fire here, enough to consume a body to this extent, they're not there.
So you're positive that this burn pit is not the primary burn site of Teresa Horbach's body?
That's correct. Yes, this cannot be the primary burn site.